My name is Isabel Hayes, and I was 27 years old when I woke up to realize my brother had erased me. Not in some symbolic half-hearted way. Not with distance that builds slowly over time. No. He cut me out completely. Block. On everything. It was a Saturday morning when I noticed it. I just poured my first cup of coffee, my phone buzzing with notifications. I scrolled absent-mindedly, until I saw his name missing from my feed. Daniel. My brother. My only sibling. At first, I thought maybe he'd deactivated his accounts. But when I searched, I found him still there, just not for me. His profile photo, visible from a friend's account, was grayed out on mine. User not found. I blinked, confused. My heart skipped. I opened my messages. The thread was gone. I dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. My hands trembled as I tried again. Same result. That's when it hit me. He hadn't disappeared. He had disappeared me. My brother, the person I'd shared a childhood with, who once swore we'd always be on each other's side, had blocked me on every platform, every app, even my phone number. I set the mug down too hard, coffee sloshing over the rim. My chest tightened, a hot ache building behind my eyes. Why? I paced the kitchen, replaying our last conversation in my head. It hadn't been perfect. Nothing between us was these days, but nothing that would justify this. We'd argued about Thanksgiving plans, about how he never showed up when family needed him. He'd brushed me off like he always did. But to go from that to this, the betrayal was sharp. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. Desperate, I grabbed my old work phone, the one I barely used anymore. I dialed his number, praying he wouldn't recognize it. Rang once. Hello. His voice. Clear. Live. My throat caught. Daniel. The line went dead. He'd heard my voice. He'd realized it was me. And he'd hung up without hesitation. I stood there, staring at the silent phone in my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. My brother had cut me out of his life. Deliberately, completely. And I had no idea why. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of our story. When I was little, I used to think Daniel and I were unbreakable. He was 2 years older, tall and loud, where I was small and quiet. He was the one who stood up for me on the playground, who held my hand when thunder shook the windows at night, who taught me how to sneak cookies from the jar without Mom noticing. For years he was my safe place. That's why his silence, his deliberate erasure, hurt more than anything. Because we weren't always like this. We grew up in a modest house on the corner of Maple Street. Our parents worked long hours, so often it was just the two of us. Daniel would make peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and pretend he was a chef. I'd sit at the table, giggling as he described the 5-star meal we were about to enjoy. We made up worlds together. Cardboard forts in the backyard, secret codes written in chalk on the driveway. When I scraped my knee at 7, it was Daniel who carried me home, his small arms straining under my weight. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. And when he turned 10 and got his first bike, he insisted I ride on the handlebars even though Mom yelled it was too dangerous. "We're a team," he told me. Always. But as we grew older, something shifted. By the time Daniel was in high school, his confidence had hardened into arrogance. He liked being the center of attention, the one with the stories, the jokes, the power. And me. I was just his little sister. Useful when he needed an audience, invisible when he didn't. I still remember one night at dinner. I'd gotten an award for my writing. First place in a statewide essay contest. I was glowing, ready to share the news. Before I could, Daniel launched into a story about scoring the winning point in a basketball game. Everyone laughed, clapped, asked him questions. My paper stayed folded in my lap the entire meal. Later, when I showed him, hoping for pride, he shrugged. "It's just writing. Not like it matters in the real world." Stung. But I told myself he didn't mean it. High school made the distance worse. Daniel thrived on being the loud, reckless one. Parties, friends, skipping class. I focused on books, volunteering, planning for college. We were opposites, and instead of balancing each other, we began to clash. When I tried to hold him accountable, like the time he borrowed my car and returned it with an empty tank, he'd sneer. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" When I pointed out that Mom and Dad worried about him, he snapped, "Stay out of my business, Isabel." Still, even then, I believed underneath it all we were still a team. The cracks became harder to ignore as we entered adulthood. At 22, I invited him to my college graduation. He promised he'd be there. He never showed. When I called, he said, "I was busy. It's just a ceremony." At 25, I moved into my first apartment. He stopped by once, looked around and muttered, "Must be nice to have everything handed to you." Everything handed to me. As if years of hard work were nothing. And then, the most chilling moment came a year ago. We were arguing about something small. Money, chores, I can't even remember, when he muttered under his breath, "Family doesn't mean forever." Froze. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer. I should have seen it then, the way the cracks had widened into canyons. I should have realized he was already pulling away, already rewriting the story of us in his head. But I didn't. I clung to the boy who carried me home with a scraped knee, the brother who swore we were a team. And that's why, when he finally blocked me on everything, it didn't just feel like betrayal. It felt like losing a part of myself. The days after I realized Daniel had blocked me felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. I kept telling myself there had to be a mistake. Glitch. Some technical issue. Maybe he'd gotten a new number, maybe his account settings had changed. Anything but the truth I already knew. He had chosen this. But denial doesn't last forever. And the universe has a cruel way of ripping the blindfold off. Started with a photo. I was scrolling through Instagram one evening when I saw it. My cousin's post. A long dining table covered in food, string lights glowing overhead, the whole family squeezed together, arms draped around each other, smiling wide. In the center of it all was Daniel, laughing, holding a beer. My parents at his side. And me. I wasn't there. Not because I couldn't make it. Not because I'd said no. I hadn't even been invited. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold around the phone. I scrolled through the comments. "So glad we finally got everyone together. Best night with the Hayes clan." Everyone. Except me. I dialed my mom. Straight to voicemail. My dad. No answer. Finally my aunt picked up. Her cheerful voice faltered when she realized it was me. "Sweetheart, I thought you weren't coming," she said softly. My chest tightened. Wasn't coming. I wasn't even told. Was. Long guilty pause. Then, "Daniel said you needed space. That it was your choice not to be involved." My voice cracked. "That's not true." "I know, honey," she whispered. "I know." But the damage was done. That night I couldn't stop scrolling. Post after post of my family together, laughing, celebrating, making memories without me. It wasn't just blocking anymore. Daniel had rewritten the narrative. He had told everyone I'd chosen this, that I didn't want to be there. He'd erased me and replaced me with a lie. A week later, a mutual friend of ours, one of the few bridges left, called me. "I don't know if I should tell you this," she began hesitantly. "Tell me," I urged. She sighed. "I heard Daniel talking the other night. He said, you're not part of his life anymore. That cutting you out was the healthiest choice he's ever made." Her words sliced through me, sharper than anything I'd heard yet. Not part of his life anymore. I hung up, numb, staring at the wall until the room blurred. I thought of the boy who carried me when I fell. The teenager who swore we'd always be a team. The brother who once meant safety. Now he was a stranger. A stranger who had decided I didn't exist. That night, curled up in bed, I felt like a ghost haunting a family that was still alive without me. For the first time I wondered if he was right, if I really didn't matter. But even in my darkest moment, a small ember of defiance flickered inside me. He thought I was gone. He thought I was erased. But I wasn't finished yet. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. When my friend's words echoed in my head, "You're not part of his life anymore," I thought it was the end of everything. But in a way it was the beginning. Because once you've been erased, there's a strange kind of freedom in knowing you can write yourself back in. The first weeks were the hardest. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Daniel to suddenly unblock me, to send some half-hearted apology. Nothing ever came. So instead of waiting, I started moving. I threw myself into my job at the non-profit. I volunteered for projects, stayed late, said yes to things I'd once been too timid to try. The more I poured into work, the less I obsessed over what I couldn't change. Slowly, the emptiness Daniel left behind began to fill with something else. Pride. At night I made lists, not of what I'd lost, but of what I wanted. A stronger career. Friendships that actually gave back what I poured in. A life that didn't orbit around Daniel's approval or absence. And somewhere in those scribbled notes was the seed of an idea. I didn't just want to move on quietly. I wanted to show him. Not by begging for his attention. Not by forcing my way back into his circle. But by showing up where he least expected. Undeniable, unshakable, and stronger than he ever imagined. The chance came faster than I thought. One afternoon, I overheard two co-workers talking about an upcoming leadership conference in the city. Dozens of companies, non-profits, and local leaders would be there. My stomach dropped when I heard one of them mention the keynote speaker list. Isabel Hayes. My brother. Apparently, he'd climbed fast in his corporate firm, and this was his moment to shine. Standing on a stage, boasting about independence and success. The irony made me laugh out loud. Independence. Success. Without family. I didn't have to wonder what he'd say. He knew. He'd paint himself as self-made, as someone who had risen above burdens, who had no need for dead weight. And I knew exactly where I needed to be. I signed up for the conference through my non-profit. My director was thrilled. "You'll represent us well," she said warmly. She had no idea what this meant for me. In the weeks leading up, I prepared. I polished my resume, sharpened my networking skills, practiced my own short presentation for a breakout session I'd been invited to lead. Every step felt like reclaiming ground Daniel had tried to steal. He thought I was erased. But I was coming back bigger, brighter, impossible to ignore. The night before the conference, I sat in my apartment with a folder of materials spread out on my bed. My name tag, my handouts, my speech notes. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if he ignored me? What if he pretended I wasn't even there? But then I remembered the pain of that phone call, the click of him hanging up when he realized it was me. This wasn't about him giving me attention. This was about me taking my place. The next morning, I walked into the Grand Hotel ballroom where the conference was being held. Suits and name badges bustled around me, the air alive with ambition and chatter. And at the far end of the room, surrounded by colleagues, stood Daniel, laughing, confident, certain I no longer existed. I smiled to myself, 'cause he had no idea I was there. And when he finally saw me, it would be exactly where he least expected. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The ballroom was buzzing, chandeliers throwing soft light across round tables, coffee cups clinking, the air thick with chatter. Suits and polished shoes moved in every direction, handshakes and business cards exchanging like currency. And there he was, Daniel. He stood near the stage, flanked by colleagues in sharp ties and women in crisp blazers, laughing too loudly. his hand cutting the air in exaggerated gestures. He looked every bit the part of a rising star, confident, untouchable, smug. But beneath it all, I saw the same brother who once told me, "Family doesn't mean forever." And today I was going to prove just how wrong he was. When the host took the podium and announced, "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Isabel Hayes," the room erupted in polite applause. I clapped too, my palms stinging, my smile sharp. Daniel strode to the stage, adjusting his jacket, soaking in the attention. His voice rang out confidently. "I'm here to talk about independence, about building success on your own without leaning on others. Too often we think family or friends define us. But real strength comes from cutting out what holds you back." My chest tightened. Each word felt like a deliberate knife, twisted deeper. But I stayed calm. Because he had no idea who was sitting 3 rows from the front, watching, waiting. He droned on about leadership, ambition, personal discipline. The audience nodded, jotting notes, sipping their coffee. Then came the Q&A. "Any questions for Mr. Hayes?" the moderator asked. Understood. My heart thundered, but my voice was steady. "Yes," I said clearly. "I have one." Dozens of heads turned. Daniel's eyes swept the crowd, and froze when they landed on me. His face drained of color. For a moment silence stretched. His mask slipped, just for an instant before he forced a smile. Yes, go ahead," he stammered. I held his gaze, unblinking. "You talk about independence, about cutting people out to succeed. Do you really believe erasing family makes you stronger? Or does it just prove how weak you are without them?" A ripple went through the crowd. Pens stilled. Eyes darted between us. Daniel's throat bobbed. This isn't the time, Isabel." Murmurs broke out. Name. Whispers. Recognition. Smiled. "Oh, so I am part of your story. Good to know. Because you blocked me everywhere else." Laughter rippled uncomfortably through the audience. Daniel's jaw clenched. "This is a professional setting." "Exactly," I cut in. "A setting where people should know the truth. You don't rise by cutting out others. You rise by lifting them with you. That's what real leadership looks like." For the first time, Daniel faltered on stage. His carefully crafted speech about independence now looked hollow, pathetic. His colleagues shifted in their seats, whispers growing louder. He opened his mouth, closed it again, searching for a comeback. But there was nothing he could say. Because I had exposed him. Not with rage, not with tears, but with calm truth. The moderator cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to move on, but the energy in the room had shifted. Daniel finished the talk, his words stumbling, his confidence cracked. As people filed out, several attendees stopped to shake my hand. "You made a good point," one said. "Strong words," another nodded. "That took courage." And Daniel. He avoided my eyes, rushing out with his colleagues, his shoulders stiff. That night, back in my apartment, I sat with a glass of water, letting the silence settle. For so long, I had let his rejection define me. His decision to block me, to cut me out, had left me feeling erased. But showing up at that conference, standing tall in front of him and everyone he wanted to impress, that was my moment. He couldn't block me there. He couldn't erase me. And in that instant I realized something. I didn't need his approval, his connection, or even his presence. I only needed to remind myself that I existed. Loudly, undeniably, in spaces he couldn't control. My brother thought he could erase me with the click of a button. But you can't delete someone's existence that easily. I showed up where he least expected, and in front of the people he wanted to impress most. He was the one left exposed. If you've ever been betrayed, silenced, or cut off by someone you trusted, subscribe now. Because these stories aren't just about pain, they're about taking back your voice.